I was still holding my coffee when, at 7:15 a.m., Karen Whitmore, our HOA president, appeared at my front door flanked by a locksmith, 2 board members, and a manila folder so fat it could have stopped the door itself. She wore the burgundy suit she reserved for what she called enforcement days, and her smile had the chill of a January morning. "We're here to perform the property transfer inspection," she announced, tapping a manicured nail against a clipboard. My brain stalled. 7 years of construction was the absolute limit under the new retroactive building rule, she said, and because my house exceeded that, it now qualified as a community asset. I stood in my work clothes, coffee half drunk, and tried to make sense of it. "Karen, this is my home. I built it myself, board by board, tile by tile." She cocked her head as if I were simply mistaken. "Under Amendment 17B of the Revised Covenant, any property with extended construction becomes eligible for HOA acquisition," she said. "We voted on it at last month's emergency meeting." I thought of that meeting. 2 in the afternoon on a weekday, when most of the neighborhood was at work, attended mostly by Karen's Wednesday wine club cronies. My name is Marcus Chin. I'm a structural engineer with a major firm in the city, and 7 years ago, I bought a parcel in Pinewood Estates, a quiet subdivision about 30 minutes out. The plan was modest. Build my dream house slowly, pay as I went, spend evenings and weekends doing most of the work myself. It was my escape from the endless deadlines of corporate projects. The lot had been vacant for years before I bought it, and at the time the HOA seemed glad someone was finally developing it. The then president, Bob, a retired accountant, used to bring me lemonade and chat over the fence while I worked. Everything changed when Karen became president 18 months ago. Downsized from retail management. She treated the HOA like a new kingdom, promising to boost property values through zealous enforcement and interpretive creativity. Calling her approach creative barely scratched the surface. She treated the bylaws as scripture that only she could interpret correctly. Small things became big ones. She measured lawn height with a ruler, timed how long trash cans sat at the curb, and insisted on pink-printed violation notices because, she said, they were more visible. The problems escalated after I moved in. The notices arrived. My mailbox was 3 inches too tall, my driveway exhibited an unacceptable sheen, and my house numbers used a serif font instead of prescribed sans. Each violation carried a $50 penalty. I started a folder of them and joked about her obsession, until the fines totaled almost $2,000 by the second month. Then came the constant monitoring. I found her photograph in my windows at dawn, claiming curtain misalignment. She measured the angle of my porch light with a protractor. She compared my front door color to an approved palette with a color wheel and declared it one shade too cheerful for the neighborhood. She began whispering to neighbors that I was running an illegal contracting business for my property because I owned tools and sometimes worked on my deck. She filed complaints with the city that pulled me away from work to handle inspectors who invariably glanced around, sighed, and left. But nothing prepared me for the sight of her and her posse on my porch that morning, convinced they could simply take the house I'd spent 7 years building. The locksmith shifted his weight like a man who decided he would rather be anywhere else, and even the 2 board members looked uncomfortable, though neither would cross her. I kept my voice steady. "Show me the amendment vote," I said. Karen flourished a page from her folder and pointed out where Amendment 17B was marked as passed by unanimous vote of attending members. The highlighted clause read that any property under construction for more than 5 years would be deemed abandoned and subject to HOA recovery. "Karen, I have been living here while building. I never abandoned the place, and you can't retroactively apply new rules to existing situations," I protested. She dismissed my argument. "The board has determined that occupancy does not include living in an incomplete structure," she said. "Under Section 9 of our Emergency Powers Clause, retroactive application is permissible." I started recording on my phone. "Are you actually trying to take my house?" I asked. She bristled at the word steal. "It's not theft," she replied. "It's a legal transfer of improperly managed assets. The community has suffered because of your prolonged construction, and this protects property values." I decided to press the point. "If you succeed, what will you do with the house?" Her face lit up. "We'll convert it into a community center. HOA meetings on the main floor. seasonal storage in the basement, offices for board members upstairs. In other words, a private suite of perks under the guise of public benefit. She insisted they had already filed for grants that identified the property as a future resource center, paperwork that, she said, was lodged with the state. That admission was a misstep that would cost her, though I didn't know it yet. I kept recording, cataloging every word. The house I had poured sweat and weekends into was suddenly the focus of a bureaucratic land grab led by a woman who treated rules like instruments of power rather than tools of governance. I forced a smile even though my insides were burning. Then I guess I'd better call my lawyer, I said. That same afternoon, I met with David Kim, a property law specialist. After I laid out what had happened, he burst out laughing before catching himself. Sorry, Marcus, but this is absurd. She can't take your house. None of this holds up legally. We pulled the official HOA bylaws from the county records, the real ones, not Karen's reworked versions. There was no such thing as Amendment 17B. The last genuine update had been about pool fencing 2 years earlier. David dug deeper and uncovered something far more serious. Karen had submitted grant applications to the state claiming my home was already a functioning community center. His expression darkened. This isn't just HOA nonsense anymore. This is fraud. Federal fraud if those grants were approved. Sure enough, the state office confirmed she had preliminary approval for $40,000 in community development funds. Payment hadn't been sent yet, but her application was stuffed with lies. She had even sent in photos of my house, claiming it was hosting literacy classes and senior activities. 3 days later, the whole thing exploded. Detective Patricia Morris showed up at my door investigating grant fraud. I handed her everything. My video of Karen on my porch, copies of the fake amendment, and all the violation notices. The locksmith admitted Karen told him she was the rightful owner performing an eviction. The 2 board members confessed they hadn't seen Amendment 17B until that very morning, when Karen showed it to them in the car. They thought they were just doing an inspection. The detective's investigation revealed this wasn't Karen's first stunt. Months earlier, she had tried to take over an elderly neighbor's shed, insisting it was an eyesore that needed to be repurposed as HOA storage. That scheme collapsed only because the neighbor's son, a police officer, intervened. Within a week, investigators uncovered even more. Karen had applied to multiple state agencies for grants, all claiming my home as community property. She had even submitted blueprints for renovations she planned to make once she seized control. The next HOA meeting was unlike any before. The recreation hall overflowed with residents buzzing about the investigation. Karen sat stiff at the head table, shuffling papers and glancing at her phone, waiting for a lawyer who clearly wasn't coming. The board called for an emergency election. When she tried to block it by inventing another rule, neighbors stood one after another, sharing stories of her harassment and ridiculous fines. The vote was crushing, 112 against her, just 3 in her favor, the wine club loyalists who looked instantly regretful. 2 weeks later, the matter reached the courthouse. Karen stood before Judge William Patterson, facing charges of attempted fraud, filing false documents, and conspiracy to commit theft. Her attorney claimed she had misunderstood the HOA's authority, but the evidence was overwhelming. The fabricated amendment, doctored meeting minutes, forged grant applications with my name listed as director of a fake community center, even emails to board members about pushing me out so she could store HOA equipment in my workshop. Karen tried to defend herself, saying she only wanted to improve the neighborhood and that I was difficult to work with. The judge interrupted sharply, pointing out that stealing someone's house did not qualify as community improvement. The sentence was harsh but fair. 3 years probation, $50,000 in fines, 300 hours of community service, and a lifetime ban from serving on any HOA board in the state. She was also ordered to cover my legal fees, $23,000 in total. Her face drained of color as she whispered, "That's more than I make in a year. I'll lose my own house." The judge's tone never softened. "Perhaps you should have considered that before trying to take someone else's," he said. "You're fortunate you're not going to jail."